We are just a few days away from Ireland's Six Nations showdown with France, and what a spectacle it promises to be at the Aviva Stadium this Saturday. On tonight's episode of the Left Wing podcast, we will talk through all the major talking points ahead of this Saturday's big game. I'm Will Slattery, and I'm delighted to be joined in studio by Luke Fitzgerald once again. Luke, how are you?
Good to be back, Will. We've had a few from home, haven't we? It's nice to be back in studio.
I know, yeah, face to face for the first time in a while. I'm also delighted
Did you miss
to be.
me?
Oh, massively. How could I not? If that's why you know it's a big week. We've managed to get you back into the studio.
Apologies.
And delighted to be joined as well by Jonathan Bradley. Jonathan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm great, guys. Great. Looking forward to the game at the weekend, so hard to beat.
Yeah, and I feel like when you come on, Jonathan, we get you on for a big preview. I feel like that's kind of the signal to the listeners that it's a bumper preview.
See, you're a big gun.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Bradley is the big guy from the BBC. And I feel like it gives us some good cred. Jonathan, I go to you first. Lots of things we can go to in this preview to kick things off, but I want to just maybe go to the mental side of this Saturday. Ireland are at home. They're going for 3 Six Nations titles in a row, which has never been done, not even in the old Five Nations officially. You know, another Grand Slam. The card is huge on Saturday. But for me, it's kind of a different energy for the French mentality insofar as we discussed after the game at Twickenham, potentially squandering another Six Nations and the pressure on Galtier. Like, I think the pressure coming into this game is massively on France. While Ireland would obviously love to win, I think France really need to win this weekend. I feel like they're coming into this game maybe in a similar place to England in 2003 coming to the Aviva or Lansdowne Road as it was then, where they just couldn't afford to lose another big game and come away empty-handed once again. And one Six Nations title out of 5 attempts for Fabien Galtier. If they lose this weekend, it'll be 1 from 6. Major question marks about this whole project and this whole era. So I feel like they have, I don't know if I'd call it an edge necessarily, but I definitely think that they're coming in with a different mindset potentially and a different feeling in the camp than what Ireland are having. Is anything that resonating with you, or am I off base?
Yeah, no, I can see it from the point of view that we see Ireland and France as by far and away the 2 best teams in the Six Nations. We think this is the 4th year where that's been the case, but where we see that as 2 teams in the top tier. If Ireland win at the weekend, then there will probably be a school of thoughts that Ireland are the top tier, France are the second tier, and then everybody else, because it would be a fairly one-sided rivalry if Ireland were to win again. We're having won 3 games in a row, and you could go back and say realistically that through what we view as this rivalry, the only game France would have then won against Ireland would have been in Paris whenever Johnny Sexton was injured. Joey Carbery had a good game that day, but it wouldn't have been what would have been considered Ireland at full bore. So I think for how we view, I was going to say this era, the Six Nations, that might be pushing it a wee bit, but this half decade in the Six Nations, we view it as Ireland v France, and I think it would be dominated by Ireland if they were to win again on Saturday. The only thing that I would say about the pressure on Ireland is the pressure of history, because they're not going to get a chance to recreate this. It takes 3 years, I suppose, to win 3 Six Nations titles outright in a row. So much like the back-to-back Grand Slams last year, and you can sense, I think, from talking to some of the players in camp that still does rankle, that missed opportunity for history. I think the way that Simon Easterby spoke after Wales, where he said this team is motivated by doing things that other teams can't, I think the idea that there is a unique piece of history, something special, something that, as you mentioned, no other team has done before, even in the Five Nations, of those 3 outright titles in a row. I think the sense of that on Ireland's shoulders, or the fact that this is something that they can have as their own. We probably look back at the World Cup, and I think there would have been a sense that winning that quarterfinal was what a lot of these players thought was going to be the thing that was attached to this Ireland team. And they don't have that. So this is their chance to have something that is unique, something that is theirs, their place in the history books. And I think there's a lot of pressure to that too.
That's interesting, yeah, because I agree with Jonathan completely in the sense of like this, winning this weekend and then completing the job against Italy the following weekend would be a special achievement that no other team has done. But I don't know if that's engineering a massive amount of pressure any more so than would be on this fixture ordinarily, like with a title on the line and beating France in a home game. What do you make of the notion that France, the desperation that they must be coming to Dublin with, like if they have to go back to Paris next weekend for a dead rubber against Scotland after losing again in a big Six Nations game, I think that's a significant kind of thing hanging over this team. And I don't disagree with Jonathan's points necessarily, but I still don't know if that matches up to what France might be feeling. How do you kind of weigh up those two kind of pressures coming into Saturday?
God, it's such an interesting question that you pose. I think I would say Galtier certainly will be feeling the pressure big time. And I think whether or not that's translated to the players or not, I don't know. France create an apprehension in me. Like they're just so unpredictable. Like the way, for example, when I look at them against England, like, to my mind, that easily could have been a 30 or 40 point win. Like if they get those, if they hang on to 3 of those pretty much gilt-edged opportunities in the first half, they go streets ahead of them. And I think it only gets worse for England in the second half, right? But they go on to lose the game. So like they're just a real quandary in my mind, and they're difficult to really. It's difficult for me to put their finger on it. It's something we always say about France, but I thought this team was different, if I'm being completely honest. Yeah. If you had asked me about this team, I'd say, geez, France is the team to beat. Like, they just have so much quality. The club teams are, kind of dominating Europe. Their game is in rude health, just in terms of top 14. They've got the international thing sorted. They now have the players for the whole competition. They kind of sorted out a few of the chinks, and they kind of, an established coaching staff. They have the top coaches, and you think of Sean Edwards and that. I thought they kind of had all this stuff boxed up, but quite clearly they haven't, and they still have some serious issues that they need to resolve. And sorry, I just want to say that about France, because I think it's important to set the stage on them. I hadn't thought about it in that context until you said it, your opening question to Jonathan. And I actually couldn't agree with you more. I think there's massive pressure. I think they really, really need to win this one. And I think that puts them in a really dangerous position for Ireland. I think it's a really dangerous fixture. Now, the flip side of that is Ireland, no matter who you play, even though they played terribly, for example, against New Zealand, that was the worst I think I've seen that team play in a very, very long period of time. And even in the World Cup against New Zealand, they didn't play well in that quarter-final. I think they're still unbelievably difficult to beat at home. No matter what, this team has a resilience. I just am so impressed with them. I think even like you think of the Wales match, how they dealt with that red card, how they pushed through and they managed to get the win at the end. They're just such an impressive team to me. And I'd love to see them do something special. I'd love to see us attach something special to this team. Now, so there's pressure with that too. And I think there's a different kind of pressure that this team has to deal with there. And I think it's traditionally been a more difficult thing for Irish teams to embrace that kind of level of expectation. I think there's probably an expectation that Ireland win this one on the weekend because they're at home, because of their record, because of how they're playing, and because of where France are at. So yeah, it's really difficult to put yourself to say, who I think is going to win. But I think it's easier for France to get up for this game than Ireland. But this team just doesn't go away. So like this, to my mind, is a really, really tight match on the weekend. Like I think this is super tight because I think Ireland is so tough to beat. France need it bad. And it's the first time I've thought about it in that context, Will.
Yeah, it's funny because of the language barrier. Like it's hard to, I can't really put myself into what the French players and coaches are thinking because you're reading their quotes through Google Translate. It always sounds like I'm possibly, flowery, like, Galtier's talking in these grand language. I'm like, but is that actually what he's saying? I'm thinking of, in Lost in Translation when Bill Murray's getting the direction from the director and he's talking for 30 seconds and the woman's just like, more intensity. I feel like there's something being lost potentially there because I'd love to know, as you say, Galtier has to be feeling the pressure, but do the players feel that way, or are they just looking at it as another Six Nations game? They need to go over there and win. And
it's difficult to pin them to a mentality, isn't it? Like in France,
when you don't speak the language, it's even more difficult. When you're just gleaning it from their play, I agree with you. Like that French England game from 3 weeks ago could have easily been like the one from 2 years prior, where France put 50 on them. But they didn't, and you have to ask why that was. And I think there was a carelessness, as we discussed at the time. I was very intrigued that for the Italy game, he dropped Peno. Galtier very pointedly kind of pointed the finger because Peno was very guilty of some, two bad ones. Yeah. And it wasn't just a case of rotating for Italy. Like he was kind of like, and he's brought him back in now. He's one try off getting Serge Blanco's matching the record all time for French try. So he'll obviously have a point to prove. And just the point about, I suppose, France having that pressure and needing to win. Well, that can be a powerful driver. Jonathan, we've seen, say, from Leinster in the Champions Cup final, like you could have made that argument for Leinster a couple of times. They can't come back to Dublin losing again, and they have. Like, so while I think it's a powerful maybe driver, it's not a guarantee of a great performance. It's not a guarantee of getting out on the right side of a result. It's just, I suppose, something to throw into the mix ahead of the weekend.
Well, it can cause you to tighten up as well. And I
Yeah.
think we've seen that with, Ireland the past 2 years in their championship deciders. I think in both occasions, they've been not the level that Ireland were at in the remainder of the championship. So I think, yes, the pressure and the Galtier element is interesting because he's probably under pressure for his job, whereas there's nobody in Ireland under pressure for their job. There's nobody in Ireland really under too much pressure for their place in the squad because it's such a settled coaching ticket. It's such a settled squad. That's not the case in France. So there's that added pressure as well. But it's just a case, I suppose, of how France deal with that pressure. Exactly like you say, the England game, not that there was as much pressure on it, but the England game, and I know we discussed it at the time, the England game to me was a very odd performance in terms of how that looked, how some of those errors looked, and the lackadaisical way in that they executed some of their plays and how that led to errors. But equally, the flip side to that can be if you take the England game as a complete aberration, and normally, as Luke said, they could have been 30 points ahead by half time, really. If they had have executed that game, and I know they didn't, ifs and buts and all that, but we're talking about France in a completely different way because they've been utterly dominant in their other two games.
Yeah, 40.
Nobody is creating try scoring opportunities in the way that this France team are in this competition.
Yeah, I think 43-0 against Wales, and what was it, 73-24 or something like that against Italy. Yeah, 11 tries. They set the record, I think, for most tries by a team in a Six Nations game that have been, I think England set it maybe in 2001 against Italy, so it would have been a long-standing record. Before we get into some of this match stuff, Luke, I just want to tidy off the Gary Ringrose thing. We talked about, the 20-minute red card at length last week, and I was actually interested to see we got a lot of comments on YouTube almost uniformly disagree.
I thought you were going in different directions.
It turns out that everyone seems to want the 20-minute red card. We're not going to get into this again, but I was surprised to see how many people actually were in favour of it in response to our discussion.
Really?
But then obviously we had this kind of thing with Simon Easterby intervening in the Gary Ringrose disciplinary hearing, saying he would have played against Cardiff for Leinster, and in the end Leinster, that game was able to be used, so he's only missing the France game this weekend. He'll be available for Italy. France aren't happy with that because they're arguing Roman Ntamack in similar circumstances couldn't use a Toulouse game, and it seems that Fabien Galtier was kind of maybe more circumspect as to whether he would have been available for that Clermont game, where Simon Easterby was adamant that he was 100% going to be playing against Cardiff. So we'll let the listeners make up their own minds as to whether they think that was a likely occurrence. But we don't need to dwell on that too long because we discussed it a lot last week. I just want to touch on that there. I'm sure most people...
That is interesting that most people like the 20-minute red card. I think it's a real diluter. I don't like it. I like the clarity. I will say that, she's a big fan of Gary Ringrose. I was surprised to hear some kind of Irish commenters saying they thought it deserved a big ban. I don't agree with that. I didn't think it was a big ban. I do think how they've operated with the Cardiff game is wrong. I think, whatever they decided on the ban probably should have been upheld. But I think, look, Ireland aren't going to be the only team that have used that to their advantage at different times. I mean, England have had a few dodgy ones with the Owen Farrell one comes to mind a little bit as well, where there's been a bit of, tackle school and all this kind of stuff. So Ireland...
Owen Farrell was going to be released for that Saracens game in the middle of the Six Nations.
Yeah, it was similar situation.
Very similar. Yeah. So Ireland are I think they're operating in a way that other teams have in the past, and I think that's an issue for the Six Nations to have a look at and say, hang on, guys. You know what I mean? That's not right.
Like on the committee, you had Leon Lloyd, former Leicester, centre and winger. You had Stefan Terblanche, a legendary Springbok, and there was another administrative type. So there's three guys who heard this argument and deemed it legitimate. So
my sense though is one game is probably the right for the collision. I think the collision was clumsy rather than nasty. Do you know that kind of way?
But it's a 6-week ban that's ended up being a 1-match ban because it was 6 weeks mitigated by 50%.
Feels harsh.
It was 50% no mitigation for good behaviour and no priors. Then it was 1 week for tackle school and 1 week a Leinster match that he wouldn't have played in. So I agree that 6 weeks does feel...
How many games do you play a year, right? So if you play, say you play... God, if you have an unbelievable season, which is pretty unheard of now, say you play 30, do they even have 30 games a year? So say they have 20 games.
20. We'll say 20.
Is 20 fair enough for games? That's a big chunk of the season if you take 6 out of that for that collision. I'm kind of thinking, there's other collisions I look at and I go, well, no, the person's trying to hurt someone there. My mind is, that was not a nasty collision. It was a clumsy one. And I think where we ended up is probably the right place.
Bad process.
Exactly,
outcome,
bad process.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think you're looking at it exactly as you've explained that, going 6 games for that. And then you're kind of going, oh, why have the 6 games if you're going to have all these silly things, and basically mitigate it back to 1, which is probably where you think you probably should have ended up anyway.
Very impressive here, disciplinary panel though. Leon Lloyd and Ter Blanche.
Well, in fairness, that is a fairly international flavour to that. So that's a good one.
It's not as if they, you might think it's these 3 blazers who haven't a clue. No, they've gotten like serious ex-professional rugby players who would be aware of what's going on, and like, so it's not as if it wasn't a robust panel. I still don't agree with the decision.
No. I think looking at it, the issue became that they had to take Simon Easterby at his word. So Simon Easterby had sent an email, rather than making a phone call, had sent an email after the red card to say, but before the suspension. And in the same way that it's almost impossible to gauge intent, I think it became impossible for the panel to essentially.
But they should just be discounting them. But John, I think going forward though, I think they need to do something about that.
Yes,
they need to just say, look, if you played the match the week before, yes, it's not beyond the realms that you could get dropped and you're playing the Cardiff game, but they're not going to play there. They're going to rest you. Like, do you know what I mean? So I think they need to just a bit of common sense. Just a bit of common sense, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, like the example that Leinster used was Boyle, and I think anybody can look at it and say there's a
Sure, Gary Ringrose going for a lion spot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't know what they do. I don't know whether they say follow weeks don't count in suspensions. I think that's probably the most sensible thing that you can do. And now, next year, obviously, we'll only have 1 follow week anyway, so there's less likelihood for this to become an issue. But I think I wouldn't blame the panel, is what I'm saying, because I don't know what the panel could do.
But could you look back? So, for example, in this case, right, could you look back at Gary Ringrose's career? Since he's been a starter, well, maybe that's not fair, but even since he's been the team, how many of those games has he played in Six Nations?
0.
I would imagine it's pretty much close to 0, possibly bar his first or second spot.
I would like the panel to have had the wherewithal to be like, well, we know like he's not playing in that game.
Let's just look back at his history.
Yeah, that should be something. But I take Jonathan's point that once Simon Easterby made the intervention,
their hands were tied.
It would have been very difficult for like 2 heroes of mine, Leon Lloyd and Stephen Ter Blanche, to be like, no, we're not going down that path. So yeah, like I just said, maybe 1 match is fair, but the way we've arrived at it doesn't. I always said after last week, it doesn't feel right, like seeing it, but that's where we've ended up. So just wanted to box that one off. Jonathan, the team selection will be interesting for Thursday. The latest news we have is Tyger Furlong trained today in a capacity that indicates he could be fit. So tomorrow, I think, which is Wednesday for people listening, is like the big training session of the week. So we'll see if he's named on Thursday. It appears Caelan Darcy and Jack Conan should be fit. So for the moment, we might operate off the basis of Conan and Darcy being fit anyway, because that's kind of the key part of my question, I guess, is what way you think they should go with the bench. Will they go a 6-2 split and lean into having a more powerful bench where you could have, say, James Ryan, Jack Conan and Ryan Baird as weapons to spring? Or would they maybe go with Ryan and Conan and then pick Conor Murray, Jack Crowley and possibly Jamie Osborne? Because obviously when you're missing Gary Ringrose, you're kind of missing that really world-class centre that kind of maybe makes you not think 6-2 is as necessary. So there's a couple of different things. And you're also throwing into the mix that France went 7-1 against Italy and 6-2 in their other 2 games. So are you kind of thinking what they might do? What way do you think Ireland should go?
I think I would probably go 6-2. I think I would have Conan back on the bench. I think he made such an impact off the bench in the first 2 games. I think Ireland's bench in general was so good in the first 2 games. They had so much power off the bench. And I think that's something that we've never particularly associated with an Ireland team, but the depth that they have, and especially the depth that they have in the forwards, where I suppose you get the pinch point is I would have Crowley on the bench and he can then cover fullback, he can cover centre, he can cover 10. You've got Murray, obviously, to cover for 9. And I suppose if you get an injury on the wing in that scenario, Hugo Keenan goes to the wing and Crowley plays fullback, probably. And I think that's probably well covered enough that you would feel confident going with, as you say, I think Baird, Ryan, Conan, and that combo off the bench. Really interesting to see what they do with the front row spots off the bench, because obviously an awful lot of that is going to be determined by who's available and who isn't. But this Six Nations, probably more so than in the last, say, 18 months, has probably caused us to question what that front row depth chart looks like. Obviously, Bealham is right there behind Tadhg Furlong, but if Furlong isn't available and Kelleher isn't available, I think it'll be really interesting to see what way those calls go as well.
Yeah, Furlong starting. It's funny, like, you know, positive news reports today. He trained. Wouldn't be surprised if he never played another game. Like, that's the kind of, like, you know, rugby updates you often get when it comes to injuries. Like, he could be playing on Thursday. He might be, you know, retiring on Friday. Like, you never know with some of these updates.
Jeez, I hope not.
Well, no, that's
absolutely crucial.
That was a joke, obviously.
Yeah,
but, like,
they've been optimistic that Furlong is going to take part in, I think, Ireland's last, 7 games at this point, and he's not played in any of them.
Yeah, he played against La Rochelle in January, which seems a long, long time ago now that we came in and we're reviewing that game. So, like, does he start if he's fit? Like,
I think you have to start him because
for the old thing of
if he runs out of you know, if Bealham goes down on
2 minutes.
2 minutes, you're kind of going, oh, geez, that's a big ask of Furlong, you know. Now, not that he's not capable of it, and he's got that experience that, you know, you think about Johnny Sexton could you know, he could play an international match having not played for 10 weeks or something. Rob Kearney was kind of similar towards the end of his career. You know, just had that experience, that kind of know how Dricko was like that as well. But it's a Sean O'Brien is another good example. Sorry, as well. I'm trying to think of a few good ones where, you know, you could have him on the bench, and ideally that's what you do. You get him in for the last 30 minutes, you know. But the safer one is to start him. But Bealham's been playing brilliantly, you know, and his scrummaging, I think, I wish I knew more, but I think it looks very good. It looks like he's been really solid there. They miss him when he's not there.
Thought he was really good off the bench against Wales.
Oh, he was unbelievable. The bench against Wales, like Baird was just so impactful off the bench. I thought Conan was very good for the bit he was on before he went off injured. Like, very, very impressive.
Would you be going 6-2?
I would, and I'd be having. The reason is that Conan will be on my bench, obviously. Yeah. I think Conan's had an outstanding championship. I think he's made the difference in some of in particularly the English game. He was brilliant off the bench. I actually thought Baird was my standout against Wales. I thought he was brilliant. I thought he had loads of energy. I thought he made some great carries. And I was really impressed with him. It was the first time in a while. I think I've kind of been like, oh, Baird, yeah, I forgot he was... Not that I forgot, but just he stood out to me. So that was great to see. And I think Jonathan's point about the bench has been, you know, is well made. I've been really impressed. I think they've been the key. If you think about the England game, that was kind of in the balance before we started unloading the bench. And I talked about it that week, saying I thought that might be the difference between ourselves and England. And I thought they saved the day against Wales. You know, that was a really tough thing. Think about Bundy's impact off the bench. I mean, he was so good off the bench. So good off the bench. And even Robbie's, you know, like whoever's been sitting on the bench for Ireland has made a big impact. So, you know, very, very impressed with them. I think Ireland are in great shape at the moment.
I think the point Jonathan made about Jack Crowley and he had outlined what happens in every scenario of an injury gives me a good bit of confidence with going 6-2.
Oh, they'll be 6-2. I think they have. And
because
Swiss Army.
Yeah, because like even like a winger getting injured, Hugo Keenan can go to the wing, Crowley can go to 15. Like, so you're only really... So basically you're kind of asking yourself, what's more important? Having the cover in case there's a second backline injury, or having Baird, Ryan and Conan?
It's a third backline injury you're worried about. I suppose a second maybe in the outfield.
Yeah, sorry, I mean second in the outfield.
Yeah, because you have to have...
Because then you'll have to put Murray on the wing or Gibson Park on the wing, which, as we saw in the game Ireland lost at Twickenham last year, that did happen. And Gibson Park had to be moved from 9 to the wing, and Murray came on and played 9, and Ireland lost a bit of impetus. So it can happen. So, but I think it's a risk worth taking when you have those three back.
What's your first concern against France? Your first concern is, can you deal with the power? Like, obviously they've got they've got that, should I say, out in the, you know, the wide channels, and obviously Dupont, etc. But your first concern is, can we deal with the power? So to my mind, that's the first thing I'm thinking about. And if you're thinking that way, and my gut is that the coaches will be feeling the same way, you have to go 6-2.
And Jonathan, I actually think, you know, so if we're operating on the basis of a 6-2 split, and let's operate on the basis again, although it might be wishful thinking, that Furlong is playing as well, then you have a bench that kind of allows you to bring on Bealham, who's playing really well, Baird, James Ryan potentially, and Jack Conan. For like that's
James Ryan not start for you? God, I thought he was brilliant in the
I just don't think he will. Not necessarily for me. I think they'll go with McCarthy and with Byrne personally. But I'm not sure. We like it's been a while since, like, I think I got the sense that they wanted to start Joe McCarthy because he hadn't played in the first 2 games. So I don't know if it was necessarily kind of the head-to-head selection battle we might be getting this weekend. So I will be intrigued to see who starts there. But Jonathan, what I was going to ask you is more the French bench. Like, they went 7-1 against Italy, but I think that the Ireland forwards I listed there, I would be much more confident in the impact of that collection of forwards than some of the French bench players who are decent. But, you know, Roman Tafafanua was there, Oscar Jegu was there. They're good players, but I wouldn't take them over James Ryan or Jack Conan either.
No, I agree with you. And like, I think it's something that we have had to sort of get used to, most especially during this Six Nations, because it's been striking how good Ireland's bench has been, and how most especially Ireland's forwards have been off the bench. Because I think you could make the argument that Jack Conan and Dan Sheehan turned the game against England after they came on. I think you can make the argument that not a forward, admittedly, but Aki and Baird turned the game against Wales whenever they came on. Yes, Ireland blitzed Scotland from the start, but you know, we're sitting here talking about Ireland being 3 from 3, but the games were in the balance, or 2 of the 3 games were in the balance when the bench came on, and then Ireland looked vastly superior, I think it's fair to say, across the end of the piece. The only concern that I would have would be in a world where Furlong's not fit, Kelleher's not fit, and it's nothing against the players individually, but you could potentially have a very inexperienced front row coming on to see the game out, if that's the way it goes. And then I wonder, do you get into the selection debate? Or you could, I suppose, it's youth against experience, isn't it? Because it's Boyle against Healy, it would be McCarthy against Herring, and you know, you would have Clarkson as your tight head in that scenario. So it would be getting the balance right between your dynamism from the younger guys and the experience that you need in what could be the end game.
You got to go Healy, Jonathan, haven't you?
Oh, well, it's definitely going to be Healy. Like, is it?
Yeah.
It's just, well, after retirement announcement, I feel like the retirement announcement, he knew what he was doing there.
Selection.
Yeah, that was a little security blanket there, I think, to make sure he got in the team.
That's a Machiavellian way of thinking. What do you think, John? It's got to be Healy for you, is it, or no? Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, I think it'll be Healy. I think the reality is that they'll try and get as much out of Porter as they possibly can. But I suppose we're talking worst case scenario here, you know.
You're just thinking Scrum for me. You got to go Healy. Like, surely he has a trick up his sleeve or something. You know, he might be able to buy you a penalty, or he could probably withstand the pressure a bit more. They're just more used to it. You think you probably get in better positions, just that experience, that know-how, I think, towards the end of the game. And yeah, I mean, it's just a big thing against France. I think it's probably coming off. My biggest concern with them is, are you going to get cleaned at the scrum against that part? Just the size of the French pack, just huge men. Yeah, and that to me is my first worry with them. You know, then can you get, you know, line out ball? And I think if Ireland do that and they kind of survive in those 2 areas against France, I just feel like we've got enough around the pitch. I think we're better around the pitch than them.
I was going to ask you though, you mentioned some areas, but Ireland have missed 91 tackles in 3 games. It's the most in the tournament. More than Italy, more than England, who had 86 and 84, I think. 86 for England, 84 for Italy. So Ireland missed 33 against England the first week, 25 against Scotland, and 33 against Wales. Now, I know missed tackles aren't the be-all and end-all. Like, you know, we've seen with, say, Leinster this season that they maybe missed tackles out the field and have scrambled really well and contained teams from scoring tries. But when you're playing a team against France that can cut you apart, that missed tackle figure would raise my eyebrow and say, if France do hit their straps and passes stick a bit more than they did at Twickenham, could it be a sticky day? Like, what when I read those numbers out to you, like, are they alarming to you, or am I over reading them?
I think, I think, you know, my concerns around this. I feel like against the good teams, I think they can kind of, particularly with just the threat out wide and France's ball handling ability, they worry me. Those tackle stats do worry me. I think you've got to be a little bit tighter there. I think you've got to get that number down. And I think it's kind of key against France as well that you do hang on to the ball for a period. You can't have them having the ball for long periods of time, particularly in your half. You know, I think they're fairly conservative. I think France over the years, they have been more conservative than maybe traditionally we think about France in their own half. I think this team is a bit more pragmatic. Not that they won't go, but I think it's generally they play a little safer, a little bit more pragmatic, as I said. But yeah, I don't think you can miss that many against them. I just feel like the England one is a bit of an outlier for me. Generally, two out of three of those I would say more often than not, they were real sitters against England. But 2 out of 3 of those opportunities that you give them, I think they kind of take them. I think of Beale Barry, these guys, like, they're just electric. You know, you make one mistake, and I think they've got the ability in their pack to get an offload away, to get another pass away that I don't think England have at the moment, that I don't think Wales have at the moment. So I think you just got to be a little bit more conscious of that against France, and you have to stick one or two more, not one or two more, probably 5 or 10 more of those tackles against France. So you just have to be really on the ball against them. But I think your senses are always a little bit heightened against France anyway. You know, I think you'll be aware of that. You'll be aware of Dupont. I think Ireland manage him better than any other team in the world, actually. I think they really manage Dupont very, very well.
He's never had one of those Dupont-esque, full-blown...
Only defensively. If you think about the matches against Ireland, you think
the
about
Mac
the
Hansen
Mac Hansen one is the one.
That gif has been shared the last few days.
It's unbelievable. But I think if you look at the other teams, you probably go, whoa, he's got this magical play where he throws it, you know, is it the Wales one or maybe Scotland where he throws the 25-metre pass after making the break and offload. You know, he doesn't have as many of those moments against Ireland that he has against other teams. They don't spring to mind, certainly, anyway. I think we manage him a bit better than that. So the key part for me then is can you survive set piece? That's the key for me, you know. And if you do those things well, I think Ireland have a good chance of beating them. I think Ireland they're a difficult team to beat. Ireland, really difficult.
Jonathan, let me change tack completely and paint a picture for you and get your opinion on something. So, say it's like 50 minutes into the game on Saturday. It's a level game, or there's 3 points either way, and Sam Prendergast has had the same level of performance he did against Wales. We had a big debate last week about whether Jack Crowley should have come on and seen it out, or whether it was right to keep Sam Prendergast on. Do you think Sam Prendergast plays the full 80 in that scenario this week, or will this game be treated differently to maybe the Wales game was treated? What's your view on that and how that might be managed?
Well, it'll go back to the 6-2 split, I suppose, as well, because if they already have Prendergast off the field in 50 minutes and they get an injury, and then you are in that situation where you're talking about Conor Murray on as a makeshift winger, switching Gibson Park to the wing. So I think it'll be nothing against Crowley's ability to come on and change the game, because we have seen that even in this short time period where Sam Prendergast has been the number one. But the 6-2 split is always going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul, and part of that is going to be that you need to hold back on your backline replacements. Like, that's just the reality of it. They're essentially there in an emergency. Maybe you roll the dice a little bit later, but certainly not as early as 50 minutes.
That's a good point. That kind of renders my question moot, that if it is 6-2, whatever about what they would have done if it's a 5-3, like, because obviously, as I said, we debated this last week with yourself and Rudd.
You're kind of stuck.
Yeah. So it's kind of Prendergast show then, again, if they go 6-2.
Look, I think they'll view that differently in the camp. I think they'll look at it and say, yeah, look, there's one obviously dodgy kick in there which kind of puts pressure on the team. The clearance kick that goes out in the full, and, that was kind of a shaky enough moment for him. But I think in the other big moments, I think the view in there will be that he kind of rose to the occasion, having had a fairly challenging period. Now, the tackling thing is a bit that really concerns me, because I think that will be up. And if you're the France team looking at this, you're going, okay, well, where do you attack Ireland? So you go, hang on a second. There's a guy there who makes 50% of his tackles. Maybe let's go there, and maybe let's rattle him a little bit. He's also their key decision maker. He's the guy that's kind of, Sexton-esque, in terms of how he guides the team around. Now, I'd say probably not as much as Sexton, because he's got Gibson Park as probably the key general in the team at the moment, but he is of that ilk. He can take over a game. He can have big moments, similar to a Sexton. So, to my mind, that's a place they go straight away. Like, if I'm the French, that's exactly
big ball carriers down the channel.
He's created a problem for himself now with stats like that. I said this. Remember, I made this point a couple of months ago. I said he needs to get that sword. He can't have this hanging over, because the big teams are very tightly matched, and they're going to be looking for somewhere where they have an edge, and they'll feel like that's an edge if someone's missing a lot of tackles. So he's got a big point to prove, I think, in that area on the weekend. And actually, if I was him, I'd be thinking about it as an opportunity to say, nah, in the big games, you don't come down my channel. You're going to get nothing there.
That's not going to happen, to be honest.
Well, no, that's how he has to view it as a player.
Like, realistically, if you look at his stats the first 3 rounds, do you really see him coming out with a huge defensive
Well, he won't
play?
get picked in the team if he doesn't make them. If he has a bad day, because he won't be able to pick him. Because Crowley is a top quality operator. You can't go down his channel. And it just, to my mind, if I'm picking a team, it's got to be defensively sound. Like, it's an easy place to start. Straight away, you're hard to beat if you're defensively stingy. Jack Crowley gives you that straight away. You might say he doesn't have the passing ability, or can put someone into the space, but he can bloody tackle that guy. He's up for the fight. I think Prendergast actually is up for the fight. I just think he's got a little bit nervous, or he hasn't been focusing on that because he's trying to get his way into the game and run the attack. but he's got to focus on it this week. It's got to be a big part of his game. He cannot be leaky down there. I think if he sews up the French attack, if he has some good tackles in there, some really solid ones, I think we don't question it again. And I don't think other teams will either. So this is a big opportunity for him. And I think he's got to rise to the occasion, because this is going to be...
he's not being picked for that. You know,
but sorry.
Not that he can't.
I don't think it's a problem for him. My issue with him is that he hasn't been focusing on it, and he seems to make some ones that you're going, oh, that was a good tackle, and then there's other ones where you go, here, like, you got to make that one. So I think if he focuses on it and he gets it right, you know, this guy he's world class then in my mind, because the rest of his game you can see. It looks very, very steady. No, he looks good. He looks like he's got the passing game. He looks like he can actually take a gap. We saw that against Leinster. He's got a bit of pace. I was worried about that. You can see he's got the booming kicking game. You know that, like, he can put with him in low, can put pressure on you. You know, with those big long kicks. So he looks perfect for the role for me. This is the little bit that I'm worried about, and he's got to get it right. I think he can. I think he's a big enough guy. He'll get bigger as time goes on. So it will get easier for him. But he's got to focus on it. It can't be something that dogs you for the rest of your career. And it could be if France run through him all day, it'll be a problem for the rest of his career.
Jonathan, anything you want to come in on there from what Luke said?
Yeah, no, I think sometimes we do forget maybe how young he is in comparison to when other Test 10s have come into the side and sort of made that jersey their own. So I agree with Luke 100% that it's something that needs to be nailed down. And if you don't, then you don't last at this level, essentially, because I understand exactly what you're saying. Well, that's not what he's picked for. But the problem is that the liability becomes greater than the talent if you can't defend, you know? So nobody's saying that he has to be
Johnny Wilkinson.
But you hide defenders all the time. Defenders get hit all the time. Like, if he's able to, like, say, like, nail the kicking aspect, like, you know, looping these 50-22s, nail his long range penalties, operate the attack, put guys through holes, and is a terrible defender that gets hid in defence, I think he still gets picked.
No, not from in my way. No. So, but if Jack Crowley does everything else at 70% of those abilities on the attacking side, and he's so much better on the defensive side, I pick him every time. I pick Crowley every time. Seriously, that's how I view it. Now, you might say, you're mad to think that, and that's fine. And people have traditionally hidden tens. No, that's not a new thing. That's not a new thing. But I think I don't think he gets picked for the Lions if he defends badly against France.
But it's Ireland I'm talking about. The Lions.
No. It's just if you think about we think about him as in the upper echelons. Finn Russell makes all his tackles. Actually, Marcus Smith misses a few, but he puts in good effort. You know, you can see he makes most of them. Probably not a great example, but he does still go in for the tackles. He's a smaller guy, but he's a smaller guy than Prendergast.
Yeah.
So I think, I just think, do you know what I'm saying? I don't think it should be a problem for him. I've seen him get stuck in. I've seen him, make a few good tackles. So there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to do that every time. To my mind, it's a concentration
thing. But you are right that, like, this weekend is going to be huge for that, because it's certainly a narrative is developed since over the
well, he's developed it himself.
Yeah, that's what I mean. No, I'm not saying it's a fake one. I'm just saying I'm just saying people are talking about it. People are tweeting the stats. You know, it's like a list of guys, and I think he's double missed tackles in the second most in the tournament. I think it's 16, and I think 8 might have been the second most. So that is certainly going to be something people will be keeping an eye out for over the weekend. Jonathan, I suppose to look at the French team, maybe Roman Ntamack is back after his 2-match ban that he had to serve. They weren't as clever in their disciplinary hearing, so he'll be back. Damian Penaud, you presume, will be back in the team. He's been brought back into the squad after being dropped, as I mentioned earlier. It's funny, I saw Gael Fiku return from injury for Racing at the weekend. I don't know if they'll look to make a change there. And I will be intrigued. Like, do you see France going 7-1 on the bench? Like, that would be... To me, if they go 7-1, they're getting 3 injuries in the first 20 minutes, and Galtier, it's going to cut to Galtier, and he's just going to be like, blowing his moustache will be flailing, and he's going to have exhales or something like that. I feel like that's the comeuppance they might get, but I've never been a fan of 7-1. I can't believe South Africa did it in a World Cup final. But what way do you see them going there? Do you think they'd actually roll the dice on that?
I think if they weren't going to be targeting this game bearing in mind that this is the game and has been the game now for 4 seasons in a row, if they weren't trying it with this in mind, then why were they trying it, would sort of be my thoughts on it. I think Ntamack being back is huge, because Ntamack, it's not just the player that you get with him, it's the player that he helps Dupont be as well. Like, I think we've seen that Toulouse understanding coming into the French team. I don't think Dupont looks quite the same player whenever he's playing with somebody else. So I think that's a massive thing that maybe has gone under the radar a wee bit, just how important it is for him to come back as well. But yeah, it'd be fascinating to see if they do try to set one. Exactly like you say, it feels like it would become an inevitability almost that they would get the injuries early.
I think it's worth mentioning as well, Jonathan. Like he's top quality as well. Like Ntamack, he's big moments. You think of
top 14
final. Like he's a big moments guy, and I agree. Like we all talk, and Dupont. Like I love talking about Dupont, but I do think in his own right, while he lets him play, it's also because he's top quality himself. You have to manage for him. So it's like it's not just that they have that understanding, and I think that is definitely a factor. I think you're also going, oh, fuck, excuse my language, sorry, we got a problem here with Ntamack as well. We can't just focus all of our attention on Dupont, which most teams would say week to week. You go, oh, got to sort that out. But you can't leave
Ntamack is so lively. Like you have to keep an eye on him. Yeah, that try in the top 14 final was one of the great scores in a big game.
He has a solid side to him as well. Will, though, do you think? I think he's quite a solid game. Like his fundamentals are really good.
Yeah, he doesn't obviously have to kick off the deck a huge amount because Ramos is in the same team as him the whole time, and you see with people like, say, Finn Russell, who earlier in their career he had Laidlaw, and I do feel like his kicking's just a little kind of, we saw against England.
But Finn Russell now has been on an unbelievable streak.
No, he's been a very good kicker for Bath and stuff like that. But
for Scotland in last year's championship.
I just feel like having not been exposed to that for a long time in his career, I don't know if you can ever be quite as good as you would be if you're kind of doing it week in, week out from an early age. So he's never really had to do it that much. I assume he could because Ramos is going to be 30 this year. He'll be probably transitioned out of the team in the next couple of years maybe, and it'll be more of a focus for Roman Ntamack. But I agree, like having him back is absolutely massive. Dupont generally, like as you said earlier, Ireland have managed him as well as you can. What is the game plan to keep him under wraps? Is it like he's so lethal around the ruck that I just feel like, as basic as it sounds, like keeping switched on just around the breakdown when he's kind of like dancing back and forth, you can go a long way to it, curtailing him to some degree.
He's a forward's nightmare. Like if you're tired, he's just the worst because he's got that power too. Like he doesn't have to. Like the problem with him is that like a lot of those kind of sniping nines, you're kind of going, well, if you get close to him, like he's not going to hand you off or bump you. Like he can do both. And he can go around you, and he can sidestep you. Like he's got the full package, and he can also pick the pass. Like that's the thing. That's what's so great about Dupont. And I think why, like, look, he probably does have to win a World Cup, or he has to do something a bit bigger than what he's doing at the moment.
There's Six Nations, maybe. Like
Six Nations. Let's start with the Six Nations. Exactly.
He's won, like
you're completely right. But I think he's just a complete player. He's got everything for me. Like even against in the Heineken Cup final against Leinster. The kicking.
Everything.
No, but everything. But the kicking was unbelievable. Like he has it all. He can impact the game everywhere. I think what Ireland have done well is that I think they recognise that, if you stay together, he's a 2-man, 3-man job all the time. And I think Ireland, what they do is they really connect well together. They talk well. I think they call him out early. I think they must train really well from, I'd say so for example, having someone like Conor Murray, I know they're a different shaped guy, but Murray's such a clever operator. I'd say having him in the attacking team this week is great. I think he really knows how to kind of give you a good picture that kind of Dupont might show you regularly. I think it helps you kind of, when you're on the pitch, to kind of manage against that. I think, and our pack have done that way better than other teams. And I think as well, an important factor is, I think our pack are really fit. I think they're really fit. I think they're smart rugby players. So I think they that's a big reason why we've been able to manage him quite well. But look, that's not to say in the weekend he doesn't have his breakout. Like he's just a nightmare to try and defend against, because for those reasons, nothing no one knows about him. But I just think, everyone will talk about maybe the breaks and the passing, but he's everything. He's got everything.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, the Leinster game, like one of the great performances, like, those big raking box kick, clearance kicks. And then hunting down Dan Sheehan, which was a guaranteed try, and like tackling him and then getting the turnover.
He had about 2 massive turnovers in the second half.
Getting that huge turnover after hauling down Dan Sheehan was an unbelievable bit of rugby. As you said, he is the full package. But at the same time, though, like, his French career is not what it ought to have been. So again, he's another guy coming in with pressure. Like, he is the captain of the team. He's the focus of world rugby. He has not got what he deserves from his international career as yet. this is a massive game for him too. Like we're sitting here talking. I'd love to. I say this a lot actually. I'd love to know what the French version of this podcast is saying. Are they saying he needs a big one this weekend? Like, they haven't got, over the line in a lot of these big games. We're saying Ireland have dealt with them well. So are they saying he hasn't delivered against Ireland, now he needs to deliver against Ireland? I'd love to know his mentality and what people in France are thinking and saying about him going into this weekend, because as good as he has been, he was poor against England at Twickenham by his own standards.
He dropped one of those.
Yeah, he dropped a bad ball. He didn't play in the Six Nations last year. Like, look, for French supporters, they won the gold at the Olympics. They probably say it was worth it in the end. But I'm talking about a Six Nations perspective. Like, they really hurt the team last year, him not being there, obviously. They were quite poor in his absence. The year before that, they lost to Ireland in the Aviva Stadium. So it's a big one for him as well. And just to circle back to something Jonathan said earlier about the 7-1 split. You're right, Jonathan, in the sense that they picked it for a reason. It was the same when South Africa picked it against New Zealand in that World Cup warm-up game. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, but they'll never use it." Like, they're just trying.
Yeah, we were all
we were never like they wouldn't use it. Then they used it against Ireland and they used it agaid
nearly cost them against New Zealand though.
Yeah, no, they might think it justified the means because they won the World Cup. But I'd be fascinated now to see if they go with it on.
Such a big risk though. Do you think? I don't think it's a necessary risk. I know, I'd say they feel like it's a massive advantage for them. Like, if they go, right, we've got some absolute brutes here. Like, if we come on, like, how are they going to contain us if we can just keep everyone injury free? But, like, do you want to be relying on that? Like, I'd rather say, okay, well, look, 2 backs is enough. Like, it's rare you'd have
2 is a justifiable risk. Only picking 1 in a sport that's such a collision-based sport is madness, I think. Like, and we have seen
the HIAs as well, like that. You know what I mean? You can go off for like not even a big collision. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, so it'll be interesting to see what route they go down. Jonathan, just as we go to wrap up, I'll ask you a question that I usually ask in these previews, and that is, like, if we reconvene next Tuesday, and Ireland have won the game and they're on the cusp of winning a Grand Slam for the second time in 3 years and 3 Six Nations titles in a row, what do you think we're talking about? Like, what will have been, kind of the winning of the game from an Irish perspective, do you reckon?
I think we'll be talking about how Ireland matched France's physicality, how they negated the French physicality. And I know I keep harping on about it, but I think we'll be talking about the bench impact, because I do think that's Ireland's point of difference, not just to France, but to every team in this competition at the minute.
Anything you want to add to that?
No, great points. I definitely will add a bit. I think they'll have to kick great, and I think it ties into the physicality point, which kind of covers everything, to be honest. But I do think the set piece has to be nailed on. I think if they got 50, I think that'd be an unbelievable result. 50%, if they kind of go a bit of parity there. I think 45, I still think they'd win the game with that. I hope that Ireland, I think maybe we'll talk about possession. I think that'll be kind of a key component for me, because I don't think he can defend against this French team for really long periods of time. And another thing, I think the discipline. The discipline is good. Like, I think we've been better than that at them. Like, we talk about, like, that match, you think about the red card. That was what really won the game over in France last year, wasn't it? Like, it was the red card.
In
like
2023, Antonio should have been sent off for that high tackle. Remember, he only got a yellow card.
But they're liable to do that. And it's rare. Like, that one last week is really rare for Ireland to get a red card. It's really, really unusual. And that wasn't even, we got away with it now because it wasn't really a full red card. But I think they're factors that I could well play a key role in who comes out on top.
We just need the emails ready to go, and whoever gets sent off for Ireland, just quickly copy and paste their name in and send it off and say he was playing for Leinster next weekend, or Munster, or whoever it may be. Jonathan, one thing we didn't talk about actually is, say, Angus Gardner's refereeing this weekend. The scrum, off the back of, I guess, Andrew Porter and how he was refereed against Wales. We had a good debate last week where Rory O'Connor was on with us about how Porter's kind of gotten the wrong side of various referees. Like, Rudd was saying that he thinks Porter's a better scrummager than the referees are maybe giving him credit for. I was kind of saying, well, whether that's true or not, ultimately the referees don't think he's a legal scrummager, so he has to work on that. I'll be fascinated for that first time they lock horns on Saturday. Weenie Antonio versus Porter, what way Angus Gardner goes early doors, because it could really set the tone for how the match is played in the early stages anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think more so than ever, and I'm seeing this even like probably more URC level than we are seeing at a test level, but it does feel like that first scrum, it always did, but that first scrum more so than ever, I think, paints the picture in the referee's mind. And we're seeing an awful lot more teams, I think, just absolutely dominating decisions. And it's because they get that impression, and they make that early. And the referees I think are becoming increasingly wary about refereeing the scrum as an individual rather than the trend or their impression of it. So I think, like, yeah, 100%. I think once you set that idea in the referee's mind, I think it's becoming increasingly hard to change.
Yeah, I'm fascinated for that first one. The supporter has become such a lightning rod that it's like,
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, it seems whatever way the perception has gone, they, like, we've been talking about it for quite a while now. They need to get it sorted, you know, because he's too good. He's too good a player. You know, he's too good. Like, you can see he's a smart player on the pitch. Very impactful everywhere. He's obviously a brilliant athlete. There's no reason why he shouldn't be great at this, you know. So look, maybe there's other factors at play, because obviously he's got a young tight head, you know, last week on the other side. That can kind of cause some issues for you. So in terms of the balance, apparently, I was asking my old man. I might be taking some cog notes there. Who's a tight head prop, obviously. So yeah, it's a tricky one, you know. And I think they have a perception problem. They need to sort it. They need to sort it, because this team shouldn't be. He's too good a player to be like, he's not. I'm never going to say Horde is a liability. He's an unbelievable player, but he shouldn't be getting painted the scrum. He's too good at that. He's too good and too smart a player for that to be happening. So they need to figure out what the story is from the referees themselves and try and fix it.
and those early penalties can be so crucial. Like, you think back to that All Blacks quarter final, it really set the tone. It like put Ireland on the back foot early on. And then against Wales, even last week, a game that obviously, in terms of stakes, wasn't the same, but Ireland were well on top when those scrum penalties started racking up early doors. Now, I know they weren't all on Porter, some of them were on Tom Clarkson as well, but in the round, like, the Ireland scrum was as a whole being kind of,
Well, he's a good bit better than all the other loose heads, isn't he?
well, that's
Like,
what we think. That's certainly what we
Yeah.
all think. And when I see him play, generally I'm like, this guy's unbelievable. But then if not every referee, but if half the referees in World Rugby are pinging him, I just don't really.
Need to figure
I
it
don't
out,
like the narrative of, oh, he's so good that, like, he's doing things and referees can't understand.
Well, I don't know if I buy Rudd's point that he's so dominant that they just don't,
It
they
doesn't
can't
look
understand
illegal.
it. It doesn't compute or whatever. I didn't really I don't know if I agree with that one. But I have to think he's too good to be, like, he's too strong. He's like, he can get himself in good position. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't fit for me. So they have to figure that one out. Why it's perceived that that he's illegal or that he's not doing it right or whatever. It just doesn't compute for me.
Okay, Mike.
But overall, I suppose, like, being a bad scrummager or being perceived to be an illegal scrummager is the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make a difference, because it only matters in the opinions of, as you say, well, 50% of the referees. So it is something that they have to get to the bottom of, regardless of the fact that we believe that Andrew Porter is somewhat miffed by all this, you know, and doesn't think that he is giving away these penalties. The fact of the matter is, it's the same as there's no pictures on the scorecard. It only matters what the referee says, because that, in the end, is what impacts the game.
I guess the only difference between being a bad scrummager and one is perceived to be illegal is that you can ideally fix the pictures, whereas you can't probably fix, if you're a terrible scrummager getting minced, you're not going to be able to all of a sudden be dominant. Whereas if he's as good as we think he is, that it ought to be a fixable thing. But as I said, this is going back to, well, the World Cup instance was 2023, so you're talking 18 months, and there's been a lot of rugby play between now and then. So that's why I'm fascinated to see how that goes this weekend. We might go to the prediction portion of the show. I'll go first. I think France are going to win this weekend. Oof. I just think, you know, there's something like that desperation of them coming. I feel like there's a lot in the line for them. And as much as I agree with Jonathan, history would be brilliant. And Ireland at home, unbelievably strong. Wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if they won. There's just something telling me France come and they kind of put to bed the narrative of them being flaky, being unable to kind of be really good on really tough away games, and to be kind of putting to bed the narrative that they've underachieved. I haven't not seen the team sheet. I'm going in a little blind, because obviously if certain Irish guys aren't fit, or France pick a certain team, I might change my mind, but that's my initial feeling. And I do think Prendergast, I'm giving me pause as well.
I'll go next. So I think like, a lot of that is resonating, but do you know what? I just think, okay, I'm going to back Prendergast to get it sorted this week. I think he's, hopefully someone in there, like, the tackle stats will be up on the wall, and he'll be embarrassed by it, and he'll sort it out. I think I'm assuming that all the Irish guys are available for selection, so Furlong and Kelleher, etc. And on that assumption, I think Ireland will have too much for them just at home. I think it's a really tight one. I don't think it's people will be bored of me saying that. I just feel like international rugby top teams, there's very little between them. But Ireland at home are difficult to beat. and I do think France are a little unsettled. They are desperate, they're dangerous, but they're a little unsettled. And I think Ireland are just playing really good rugby at the moment. I'm going Ireland. I think they're playing, and they're really settled in the big positions. I think Keenan, really settled. Lowe's playing out of his skin. The two boys in the centres, I know we'll miss Ringrose, but two boys in the centres, very solid, very physical. Pack and the bench on the guys are on the bench for the pack. I think they've got enough to survive against France and thrive, hopefully. So yeah, I'm going Ireland win.
I know when you go through the team sheet, like there's no holes in it. It's just
if we're picking from the full complement, we're assuming that.
It's just a sense I have. It's not necessarily borne out by me, like by anything other than just my feeling that France are coming and it's their moment to kind of.
I wouldn't rubbish what you said.
I completely
can see. I can see that, and I know the desperation. That's my feeling on it. What do you think, Jonathan?
Yeah. Whenever we were coming into the tournament, I didn't think that Ireland would win a Grand Slam. And everything that Will was saying was almost convincing me there. But I think I'm still just about think Ireland are going to win. But I'm talking toss of a coin stuff. I think Ireland just have the edge in terms of the personnel for assuming that everybody's fit. And I'm talking really, really just about. And I think the fact that it's at home, and I think the fact that there will be such a buzz around those three guys retiring and it being their last game, that I think we'll probably see the biggest atmosphere that we've had in a while as well. So I think being at home allied with that will just about see Ireland home.
Funny we didn't even touch on the three lads. We've come to the end of the preview, and to be fair, like it was last week, so I feel like
we'll definitely get to cover it on next week. I think we can give them a proper sending off then, I think.
Do you want anything you want to say? Three former teammates before we wrap up?
Well, I think next week will be better, but yeah, look.
Not if they lose.
Well, hopefully, yeah. Okay, fair enough. I think. Well, obviously, Cian would be close to the heart. That one, we played against each other all the way up, like all the way back to like under 10s. We played a match against each other in Lansdowne Road. He played for Clontarf and me for Lansdowne. What a guy. Like really, really top bloke. Such an interesting fella. Really generous. Maybe you don't see that kind of from the tough exterior, but a great teammate, like super teammate, real unusual character, but really one of the best. So delighted that he kind of hopefully gets to go out in a high. I'm hoping, I'm praying that he gets to go out in a high. In terms of the other two guys, know them, a little, I know them well enough in terms of having played with them. Great characters, brilliant for that Munster team. I've kind of managed the team well, I think, through a fairly difficult period for them, on and off pitch. They've had some challenges, I think, down in Munster, but I think brilliant in an Irish jersey, really top quality operators, top people, really good people, and that's really important no matter what you're doing in any walk. So really, really good people, all three, and not surprised they've gone on to have brilliant careers, because they will work really hard and they're great to work with on a day-to-day basis, and they're all a bit of crack. They all add something to the setup, so I'm not surprised they've been in there that long. So I hope that that's hard to do justice to kind of 10, 12 year careers, maybe 15 for Cian, but I hope it did a little bit of justice to them there. Great guys.
Right. You kind of a nice little tight, fitting tribute to them. And as Jonathan said, it should make for an unbelievable atmosphere this weekend. And not that the atmosphere needs to be ratcheted up with another few notches, but it certainly will be. For now, I'd like to thank Luke and Jonathan for joining me on this week's episode of the Left Wing Podcast. Sinead, Rudd and Cian will have a show reacting to Ireland versus France on Saturday, and myself and Luke will be back next Tuesday to review what should be an unbelievable game of rugby. So until next time, thanks for listening and goodbye.